Welcome to the deep dive. Today, well, we've got some challenging sources in front of us. We're looking at a really difficult historical case from East Germany.
Right.
The focus is Erwin Hagedorn, an East German serial killer. We'll be covering his crimes, the investigation, and ultimately his execution.
Yeah, the material you've shared lays it out pretty clearly. It's a grim look, definitely, but it details the facts chronologically, from the first murders right through to the end.
So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really just to walk through the facts as presented in these sources, understand the chilling details.
And place it in context, right? East Germany at that time.
Exactly. It's tough stuff, no doubt. But looking closely at what's documented, maybe we can get some insight into that specific moment.
Okay, let's get started then.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source gives us the basics first. Hans Erwin Hagedorn, born January 30, 1952. That was in Eberswald, Brandenburg, East Germany, obviously.
And he died quite young, September 15th, 1972, just 20 years old.
Yeah, in Leipzig prison. And the cause of death, stated in the source, is execution by shooting.
Yeah.
Very stark.
And the source identifies him right away. An East German serial killer, responsible for murdering 3 young boys between 69 and 71. It also lists the motive as sexual sadism. So, I mean, that sets the stage for the kind of crimes we're examining here, based strictly on these facts.
Absolutely. And the sources, they get into the first horrific events pretty quickly. May 31st, 1969.
Yeah.
Hagedorn killed 2 9-year-old boys, Henry Specht and Mario Louis, in a forest near Eberswald.
And the method described is just brutal. A knife, deep cuts to the neck.
It gets worse. The source says the bodies weren't even found for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And there's this incredibly grim detail. Because of decomposition, one boy's head was actually severed from the severity of the cut.
That's, yeah, just awful.
So what happened after these first 2 murders? What does the source say about the investigation?
Well, what's fascinating here, looking at the material, is the response. It notes extensive investigations kicked off right away. They even put together a psychological offender profile. And maybe most interestingly, the Stasi, the Ministry for State Security, they got involved.
Right.
They actually obtained documents about a West German case, the child murderer Jürgen Bartsch. So they were looking outside, for parallels.
Trying to figure it out.
Exactly. Trying to understand the profile. But despite all that effort, the source says those initial investigations, they didn't pan out. They didn't find him then.
Which highlights the difficulty, I suppose.
Yep.
And tragically, it wasn't over.
No.
The source documents a 3rd murder, October 7, 1971. This time, Ronald Winkler, a 12-year-old boy.
And the source points out, crucially, it was the same area, same forest.
In the same method as the first 2 victims?
Yes, horrific. But this 3rd murder, according to the source, this was actually the turning point.
How so?
Well, shortly after this, the decisive clue finally emerged. But it wasn't directly from the Winkler investigation, interestingly. The source states the key tip came from another boy, someone who reported being sexually harassed by Hagedorn. But this was way back, before the first murders even happened, in the year prior.
Wow. So an earlier incident.
Exactly. If you connect the dots, this earlier, seemingly separate event, that was the key. It linked Hagedorn to the pattern of behavior,
And that earlier report led to his arrest.
That's what the source indicates. It led them to him. Erwin Hagedorn was arrested November 12, 1971.
And did he resist? What happened then?
According to the source, no resistance. He immediately confessed to the murders. Just like that.
Right, so confession secured. What about the legal side? East Germany, early 70s, the death penalty.
Yeah, this is where the legal context, as detailed in the source, becomes really crucial. Capital punishment for juveniles under 18s had actually been abolished way back in 1952.
Okay. But Hagedorn was older than 18 for some of the crimes.
Exactly. The source specifically points out he was 19 when he killed Ronald Winkler in 1971. So under East German law at that time, that made him an adult for that specific crime.
I see. So it was the timing of the last murder?
Precisely. That distinction, based purely on his age at the time of the 71 murder, is what made him legally eligible for execution, according to the source, even though he was a minor for the first 2.
That's quite a specific legal point the source highlights. So, following the confession.
Conviction. In May 1972, Hagedorn was convicted. The source lists the charges: 3 counts of murder with aggravating circumstances.
Making the crime more severe, essentially.
Right, plus sexual abuse and attempted sexual abuse. And the sentence was death.
Was there any appeal process mentioned?
Yes, the source notes an appeal for clemency was submitted. Standard procedure, maybe.
But
Denied. By the head of state himself, Walter Ulbricht. The source is specific about that.
So the highest level confirmed the sentence,
Seems so, which then led directly to the execution.
which the source describes took place September 15th, 1972. Hagedorn was 20.
20 years old.
And the method, again, the source states, a single shot to the back of the neck.
Yeah. What's, well, fascinating feels like the wrong word, but the source provides this really stark detail. It identifies the executioner,
Oh.
Hermann Lorenz. The source notes he was a Stasi officer, and apparently he carried out 29 executions in total.
29.
Yeah, and it even includes a snippet, apparently from an interview with Lorenz later on.
What did he say?
He recounted that neither Hagedorn nor any of the other 28 people he executed cried out or resisted when they were taken to the death chamber.
So silence.
According to Lorenz's account in the source, yes. It's a small detail, clinical almost, but it offers this chilling glimpse into the final moments of state execution there.
Definitely chilling. And after the execution, what happened to his body?
The source just notes briefly, cremated,
Hmm.
buried in a secret location. Standard practice, perhaps, for such cases in that system.
Right, no public grave.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source does touch on capital punishment in East Germany more broadly. It mentions that executions for ordinary crimes like Hagedorn's were sort of distinct from the perhaps more numerous executions for political reasons,
Okay.
or even for government officials convicted of ordinary crimes, which apparently continued later. The source mentions the last known execution overall was Werner Teskey in 1981.
So Hagedorn's case falls within that period where executions for non-political crimes, though maybe less frequent than political ones later, were still happening.
Exactly. It stands as this documented example of the death penalty for, well, horrific violent crimes within that specific East German judicial system. It wasn't unique, but it's a notable case.
And for anyone listening who wants to dig deeper, the source does point towards more information. Right?
Yeah, it mentions things like see also, documentary, literature, and references sections. So it shows this isn't some forgotten, obscure event. It's been studied, documented, materials are out there.
Which brings us back to the why. Why delve into something so disturbing?
Well, I think by examining the facts laid out in the source, you get more than just the story of a crime. You get a window into how a specific justice system operated.
In a very different time and place.
Exactly. East Germany. It forces you, the listener, to grapple with these really complex, uncomfortable issues, doesn't it? Crime, investigation, state power, punishment.
It really does. You see this intersection of horrific localized violence with the broader machinery of the East German state, which was often quite hidden. So just to recap, we've walked through the grim facts of the Erwin Hagedorn case, all based on the source material we have, from those awful crimes in the Eberswald forest.
Against incredibly young boys.
Through the investigation, the Stasi involvement, the capture, the confession, the specific legal situation, and ultimately his execution.
Yeah, and we unpack some key points the source emphasizes. The youth of everyone involved, perpetrator and victims, the sheer brutality of the methods, the investigation's path, including that international look, and the crucial earlier clue.
Right, that harassment report from before the murders.
The legal technicality about his age for the final murder, making him eligible for death, Ulbricht denying clemency, and those stark details about the execution itself. The single shot, Lorenz's account, the secret burial.
So as you process all this, what does it all mean? It's worth considering the layers here described in the source. Obviously, the horrific nature of crimes against children, that's undeniable.
But also that very specific East German legal context leading to a 20-year-old's execution.
And those chilling details, the executioner's almost detached memory, the secret burial, it makes you think. What aspect of this documented history, this specific case, stands out most to you, the listener? What does it prompt you to reflect on?